Olwoch, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to Morning Live. Can you hear us, Dr. Olwoch? Good morning.
Yes, morning, Leanne, and good morning, listeners.
Good to have you on the show. Let's just start the interview with really the most important issue that's being highlighted here. What is the impact of climate change on our health?
The impacts of climate change on health are very, very important. They are very difficult to quantify, and they are not yet very well known. And the reason being that they manifest themselves through other sectors. For instance, the impacts of climate change on agriculture will end up resulting in effects of climate change on health through malnutrition. The impacts of climate change on water resources also will in the end result in the effects on health as a result of waterborne diseases and infections. And the impacts of climate change on biodiversity also in the long run will result in impacts on health. For instance, when we lose biological diversity, we end up losing natural enemies that could otherwise protect us from diseases. But there are also other direct impacts of climate change on health, including heat waves. If you remember the heat wave that took place in Paris in 2000, very many people died, especially the elderly, not from climate change directly, but from heart diseases, because climate change or increase in temperature makes it worse. But there are also other effects directly from floods, like what happened in Mozambique, where people die physically, but also because floods result in malaria increases straight after the floods. Then we also have, of course, other things that happen as a result of food shortages, migration, where people migrate to other areas and they carry diseases, or even where people migrate in infected areas with no immunity, and they end up increase the infestation rates in their bodies. Yeah. And of course, ultimately, we have increase in vector-borne diseases, including malaria, including Rift Valley and other tick-borne diseases, and even bilharzia. These diseases occur because temperatures may change in different areas. There may be a shift in the distribution of the areas, but may also be an increase of these diseases. So there are so many pathways through which climate change impacts on health. But I think what we should realize is that it's not only climate that actually impacts on diseases. Yeah. Poverty, underdevelopment, and all these increase vulnerability and make the impacts of climate change on health very, very important, and an urgent attention, I think, should be attached to them in our countries.
Yeah. And when we speak in simple terms, how does climate change cause an increase in vector-borne diseases?
For a vector-borne disease to occur, there must at least be three organisms. There must be a vector, such as malaria. There must be a parasite, such as Plasmodium, and a host, which could be a human being or could be an animal. All these organisms are sensitive to climate. For instance, the suitable climate for mosquito reproduction is about 25 to 27, but the life cycle can also be completed below that. But that means that when temperature increases from 10 towards 25, there is a decrease in the reproduction. So the reproduction rate is faster, meaning that we have more mosquitoes in a very short time. For example, the study I did on ticks, we found that in Southern Africa, there was one tick which had only one generation time for a year, but now there are 2 generation time, meaning that there are more tick-borne diseases and there are more ticks which are infecting the animals. So temperature and rainfall are 2 key climatic characteristics because they result in increase in vector-borne diseases, but they also result in the shortening of incubation period of the parasite. So much so that there is a quicker incubation period of Plasmodium in the human, and making the infestation rate very, very fast. So as we increase temperatures, as we also have water is also very, very important. Yeah. For example, a suitable water for mosquitoes is critical because breeding takes place in a good, clean water source. Okay. And as we've already seen on the slide, too much water results in eggs dying away. And in fact, in some West African countries, they have used gullies. They dig gullies and fill them with water, and that kills mosquitoes. All right. So once again, temperature, rainfall are extremely important because they increase the population of these vectors.
All right. Let's just wrap this interview up. There's so much to talk about and we've got no time. How can we lessen the impact of climate change on our health?
There are two ways that we can lessen the impact. First of all, on a global scale, I think mitigation is extremely important because, and this is not only for companies or for governments, I think all of us should make sure that we live a lifestyle that results in decrease in greenhouse gases. In the end, this will reduce the speed at which climate change is happening, and also in the end reduce the impacts on health. But practically, adaptation, I think, is the key. We need to make sure that we improve awareness on climate and disease relationship. We need to make sure that we improve surveillance of diseases so that when control programs take place, they're taking place in the right locations. But we also need to improve our housing type and location of housing. And we need to make sure that we improve our protective measures when we go to those areas. I also think that lessening the impacts of climate change on health will go hand in hand with economic development, because most of diseases are related to poverty and underdevelopment.
All right, Dr. Olwoch, thank you very much for talking to us. Dr. Jane Olwoch is a human and animal health expert, basically on climate change, talking to us about waterborne diseases and others due to climate change in our Pretoria studio. Thank you very much for joining us.